The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, and Katherine Grace stepped down onto the dusty street of Tahlequah, Indian Territory, clutching her worn carpet bag with trembling fingers while her left eye throbbed beneath the yellowing bruise that spread across her cheekbone like spilled ink. She had hoped the journey would give her enough time for the swelling to disappear completely, but 3 weeks on the road had only faded it from deep purple to a sickly greenish yellow. Katherine pulled her bonnet forward, trying to hide the evidence of her former life, and searched the gathered crowd for the man who had sent for her. Mr. Marcus Bryant, rancher, widower, seeking companionship and help with his small ranch outside of town. His letters had been kind, straightforward, promising nothing more than honest work and respect. After what she had endured back in St. Louis, respect seemed like a luxury she could barely imagine. The September heat of 1878 pressed down on her shoulders as she stood there, wondering which face belonged to her future. A tall man separated himself from the cluster of townsfolk, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust as he approached. He wore simple working clothes, a worn hat shading his face, but as he drew closer, Katherine noticed the way his dark eyes softened when they landed on her. Then they widened slightly, and she knew he had seen the bruise. Miss Grace. His voice was deep but gentle, nothing like the harsh bark she had grown accustomed to. Mr. Bryant. She managed a small curtsy despite her exhaustion. I apologize for my appearance. The journey was rather difficult. Marcus removed his hat, revealing brown hair that needed cutting and a face weathered by sun and hard work. He could not have been more than 30, with a strong jaw and the kind of build that came from years of physical labor. But it was his eyes that held her attention. They were full of concern rather than the anger or disappointment she had expected. "No need to apologize, Miss Grace. You must be tired and thirsty. My wagon is just over here." He gestured toward a sturdy buckboard, then hesitated. "May I take your bag?" The simple courtesy nearly undid her. Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice, and allowed him to take the carpet bag. As they walked toward the wagon, she was acutely aware of the curious stares from the townspeople. Tahlequah was smaller than she had imagined, a growing town that served as the capital of the Cherokee Nation, with a mixture of Cherokee residents and white settlers creating a unique community, unlike anything she had known in Missouri. Marcus helped her onto the wagon seat with careful hands, never gripping too tightly, always giving her space to settle herself. When he climbed up beside her and took the reins, he did not immediately start the horses moving. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression serious. "Miss Grace, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know you can be honest with me." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Did someone hurt you?" Katherine's breath caught in her throat. She had prepared dozens of lies during the journey, stories about accidents and clumsiness, anything to avoid the truth. But something in Marcus Bryant's face made those lies stick in her throat like dry bread. "My former employer," she finally whispered, the words barely audible over the sounds of the busy street. "Mr. Thornton. He had been drinking, and I accidentally broke one of his wife's china plates. He said I needed to learn to be more careful." Marcus's jaw tightened, and his hands clenched on the reins. For a moment, Katherine felt a spike of fear, the old instinct to flinch and protect herself. But Marcus did not raise his voice or his hand. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate breath and met her eyes with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Never again," he said, his voice low and fierce. "Do you hear me, Miss Grace? Never again will anyone raise a hand to you. I swear it on my life and on everything I hold sacred. You are under my protection now, and I keep my promises." Tears sprang to Katherine's eyes before she could stop them. She had not cried when Thornton hit her. She had not cried during the long journey west, sitting in cramped stage coaches and sleeping in questionable hotels. But those 3 words, spoken with such conviction, broke through the walls she had built around her heart. "Thank you," she managed, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Marcus gave her a moment to compose herself, then gently clicked to the horses. They moved through town at an easy pace, giving Katherine a chance to observe her new home. They passed a courthouse, several stores, and a few churches. Cherokee families walked alongside white settlers, conducting business and conversation in a mixture of English and Cherokee. It was different from St. Louis, less formal perhaps, but there was a sense of community that she had never experienced in the big city. "The ranch is about 5 miles outside of town," Marcus explained as they left the main street behind. "It's not much, just a small house and barn, some grazing land for cattle. My wife, Sarah, died 2 years ago from fever. We never had children, so it's just been me and my foreman, Tom Whitfield, who has a small cabin on the property. He's a good man, bit rough around the edges but respectful." "I'm sorry for your loss," Katherine said softly. "Thank you." Marcus glanced at her. "I want to be clear about something, Miss Grace. I know the advertisement said I was seeking a bride and I am hoping we can build something together, but I'm not expecting anything from you right away. You'll have your own room, your own space. We can take time to get to know each other properly. If you decide this isn't what you want, I'll help you find other arrangements. You're not trapped here." Katherine studied his profile as he drove, the straight line of his nose, the small scar on his chin, the way his shoulders carried tension as though he expected her to reject him. She had come here out of desperation, fleeing a situation that had become unbearable. The idea of a man who would give her space and choices seemed almost too good to be true. "I appreciate that, Mr. Bryant, truly. But I should be honest with you as well. I came here because I had nowhere else to go. Mr. Thornton dismissed me without references after the incident, claiming I had tried to steal from him. No one else in St. Louis would hire me. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like divine providence. Call me Marcus, please. And I'm glad you found the advertisement. I'll be honest, too. I've been lonely. The ranch work keeps me busy, but coming home to an empty house every night weighs heavy. I'm hoping we can be partners, Miss Grace. Help each other build a good life out here." "Katherine," she said. "You can call me Katherine." He smiled then, a genuine warm expression that transformed his serious face. "Katherine, that's a beautiful name." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon rocking gently as they followed a well-worn path through rolling grassland. The late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. Katherine saw cattle grazing in the distance, watched hawks circling overhead, and felt something in her chest loosen slightly. This land was so different from the cramped streets of St. Louis, so open and free. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small hill. It was modest but well-maintained, a single-story structure built from local wood with a covered porch running along the front. A barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and a few other outbuildings. Everything spoke of care and hard work, the kind of place a person could be proud of. "It's lovely," Katherine said, meaning it. Marcus looked pleased as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "I've tried to keep it up the way Sarah would have wanted. She always said a home should be welcoming, even if it's simple." He helped Katherine down from the wagon, and she noticed again how careful he was, how he released her hand immediately once she was steady on her feet. A man emerged from the barn, older than Marcus by perhaps 20 years, with graying hair and a weathered face. He wiped his hands on his pants as he approached. "Tom, this is Miss Katherine Grace. Katherine, Tom Whitfield, my foreman and friend." Tom nodded respectfully, touching the brim of his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Grace. Welcome to the ranch." "Thank you, Mr. Whitfield." "Just Tom, madam. We don't stand much on formality out here." His eyes briefly noted her bruised face, and his expression hardened, but he said nothing, just looked at Marcus with a questioning glance. "Tom, would you mind taking care of the horses? I want to show Katherine around before it gets dark." "Sure thing, boss." Tom took the wagon and headed toward the barn, leaving them alone. Marcus picked up Katherine's carpetbag and led her toward the house. The interior was clean and organized, with simple furniture and touches that spoke of a woman's hand. Curtains hung at the windows, a quilt draped over the back of a chair, small things that made the space feel like a home rather than just a house. "This was Sarah's doing," Marcus said, following her gaze. "I haven't had the heart to change much. If you want to make your own mark on the place, please do. It should feel like your home too." He showed her through the main room with its stone fireplace, the kitchen with a good iron stove, and then down a short hallway to 2 bedrooms. "This was our room," he said, indicating the larger of the two. "But I've moved my things to the smaller one. This one is yours for as long as you want it." Katherine stepped into the room and found it sunny and clean, with a real bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a wardrobe for her clothes. A window looked out over the grassland, and she could see the sunset beginning to paint the sky in brilliant colors. "It's more than I expected," she admitted. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll let you rest and freshen up. There's water in the pitcher, and I'll have supper ready in about an hour if you're hungry. Nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Katherine sank down onto the bed and let out a long breath. Her hands were shaking, and she pressed them against her knees to still them. This place, this man, it all seemed too good to be real. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Marcus to show his true colors. But the way he had looked at her bruised face, the promise he had made, felt genuine in a way she had not experienced before. She stood and poured water into the basin, washing away the dust of travel and carefully cleaning around her eye. The bruise still looked terrible, a reminder of her last night in St. Louis. Thornton had not just hit her once. He had struck her 3 times, and when she fell, he kicked her ribs. She had left that house in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small amount of money she had saved. Buying the train ticket, West had taken nearly everything she had. Katherine changed into her only other dress, a simple gray cotton that was worn but clean. She brushed out her dark hair and pinned it up properly, trying to look presentable despite the bruise. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Marcus in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove. He had removed his hat and rolled up his sleeves, looking very much like a man comfortable in his own space. "Smells wonderful," Katherine said, and it did. Her stomach reminded her that she had eaten very little during the journey, surviving on hard bread and cheese. "My cooking's nothing special, but it'll fill you up." Marcus gestured to the table. "Please sit. Can I get you some coffee?" "Yes, please." They sat together at the simple wooden table, and Marcus served up generous portions of beef stew thick with vegetables and a plate of fluffy biscuits. For several minutes they ate in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Katherine was too hungry to worry about manners, and Marcus seemed content to let her eat her fill. "This is delicious," she said finally, mopping up gravy with a piece of biscuit. "Sarah taught me the basics before she got sick, said a man should know how to feed himself properly." His voice held affection when he spoke of his late wife, and Katherine found herself curious about the woman who had clearly held his heart. "How long were you married?" 5 years. "We met at a church social in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I was working as a ranch hand back then, saving up to buy my own place. Sarah was visiting relatives. We wrote letters for nearly a year before I saved enough money to go back and court her properly. She was the bravest woman I ever knew, agreeing to marry me and move out here when it was still pretty wild. He paused, his eyes distant. She loved this place, though, made it a home. When the fever took her, it was fast. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone. Tom and I buried her on that hill overlooking the south pasture, where she used to sit and watch the sunset. She sounds wonderful, she was, but she would want me to live to find happiness again. That's the kind of person she was. Marcus looked at Katherine directly. I'm not looking to replace her. What we had was special, but I believe a person can love more than once in different ways. Does that make sense? It does. Katherine took a sip of her coffee, gathering her courage. I should tell you about my situation, the whole truth of it. You deserve to know what you're getting into. Marcus refilled her coffee cup and settled back in his chair. I'm listening. I grew up in an orphanage in St. Louis, never knew my parents. When I turned 16, the sisters found me a position as a housemaid for the Thornton family. Mr. Thornton was a banker, well respected in society. Mrs. Thornton was very particular about her house and her reputation. For 2 years, everything was fine. I worked hard, kept my head down, sent most of my wages to the orphanage to help the younger children. Then Mrs. Thornton became ill and spent most of her time in bed. Mr. Thornton started drinking more. He would come home late and find fault with everything. The house was never clean enough, the meals never right, even though I was just the housemaid and the cook prepared the food. She paused, her hands tightening around the coffee cup. Marcus did not interrupt, just waited patiently for her to continue. About 6 months ago, he started making comments. About my appearance, about how I was getting older, suggesting that I should be grateful for the position and willing to show my gratitude. I tried to avoid him, but that night, the night he hit me, I could not. Mrs. Thornton had asked me to bring her supper tray back to the kitchen. I was washing the dishes when Mr. Thornton came in, very drunk. He cornered me by the sink and put his hands on me. I pushed him away and he stumbled. That's when he noticed a broken plate. Mrs. Thornton's favorite china. I had been so frightened that I dropped it. Katherine's voice was steady now, as though she was recounting someone else's story. He started yelling, saying I was clumsy and ungrateful and worse things. Then he hit me. When I fell, he kicked me. Mrs. Thornton heard the commotion and came downstairs. Instead of helping me, she accused me of trying to seduce her husband. They both said I had stolen money from them, which was a lie. They threw me out that night with nothing. I had a little money saved in my room that I grabbed before I left. I spent a week in a terrible boarding house trying to find work, but the Thorntons had spread rumors. No one would hire me. That's when I saw your advertisement in the newspaper. I used the last of my money to come here. So you see, I have nothing to offer you. No dowry, no family, no reputation. I'm just a desperate woman looking for a fresh start. Marcus was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Katherine forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting to see doubt or disgust. Instead, she saw anger but not directed at her. Those people should be horsewhipped, he said quietly. Taking advantage of a young woman in their care, then blaming her for their own evil. It makes my blood boil. I worried you would not believe me. That's what Mrs. Thornton said, that no one would believe a housemaid over a banker and his wife. I believe you, Katherine. I see the truth in your eyes and I see the evidence on your face. What that man did to you was wrong, criminal even, but he's not here and you are. You're safe now. He reached across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. I meant what I said this afternoon. Never again. You have my word. Katherine placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses from years of ranch work, the warmth and strength. His fingers closed gently around hers, and for the first time in months she felt something like hope. They cleaned up the supper dishes together, Marcus washing while Katherine dried and put away. He showed her where everything went, explaining his simple system for keeping the kitchen organized. It was domestic and ordinary, and Katherine found herself relaxing into the routine of it. As the sun set completely and darkness settled over the ranch, Marcus lit a few oil lamps. "I usually turn in pretty early and rise before dawn. The cattle won't wait for a man to sleep in. But you should rest as much as you need tomorrow. There's no rush for you to start working. Give yourself time to recover from the journey." "I want to help," Katherine said. "I want to earn my place here." "You already have a place here, Katherine. You don't have to earn it, but if you want to help, I won't stop you. There's plenty to do on a ranch." He smiled. "Fair warning, though, I'll probably ask you to take over the cooking if you're willing. My stew is edible, but I won't claim it's anything special. I can cook. Mrs. Thornton's cook taught me quite a bit, said it was good for a housemaid to have skills. Then we'll make a good team." Marcus walked her to the bedroom door. "Sleep well, Katherine. If you need anything during the night, anything at all, just knock on my door. I'm a light sleeper." "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." "No thanks needed. This is your home now." Katherine closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She prepared for bed in the dim light of the lamp, changing into her nightgown and letting down her hair. The bed was more comfortable than anything she had slept in for weeks, with clean sheets and soft pillows. She blew out the lamp and lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Crickets chirped outside her window. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed. She heard Marcus moving around in his room, the creak of floorboards, then silence. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Katherine felt safe enough to truly sleep. She woke to the sound of roosters crowing and pale dawn light filtering through her window. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting to see the cramped boarding house room or the servants' quarters at the Thorntons. Then memory returned, and with it, a flutter of nervousness. Her first full day at the ranch. Katherine dressed quickly in her work dress, braided her hair, and made her way to the kitchen. Marcus was already up, dressed for the day, with coffee brewing on the stove. "Good morning," he said, looking pleased to see her. "I thought you might sleep longer. I'm used to rising early. At the Thorntons, I had to have breakfast ready by 6. Well, here you can set your own schedule, but since you're up, would you like to help me feed the chickens? It's a good way to see the property in the morning light." They went outside together, and Katherine was struck by the beauty of the ranch in early morning. Mist hung low over the grassland, and the air was cool and fresh. Marcus showed her the chicken coop, explaining his system for feeding and collecting eggs. The hens were fat and healthy, clucking contentedly as Katherine scattered grain for them. "We usually get about a dozen eggs a day," Marcus said. "More than Tom and I need, so we trade them in town for supplies. You can gather them after they finish eating." Tom emerged from his cabin as they were finishing with the chickens. He nodded a greeting and joined Marcus by the barn. Katherine could hear them discussing the day's work, something about moving cattle to a different pasture and mending a section of fence. She gathered the eggs in a basket Marcus provided, finding 11 warm eggs nestled in the straw. When she returned to the house, she set about making a proper breakfast. There was bacon in the cold box, flour for flapjacks, and fresh eggs. By the time Marcus and Tom came in from the barn, she had the table set with stacks of golden flapjacks, crispy bacon, and scrambled eggs. "Well now," Tom said, removing his hat. "This is a sight better than the boss's cooking. No offense, Marcus." "None taken." "Katherine, this looks wonderful." They ate together, the three of them, and Katherine found herself enjoying the easy conversation. Tom told stories about the local area, explaining that many Cherokee families had ranches nearby, and that relations between the Cherokee Nation and white settlers had been mostly peaceful in this part of Indian Territory. Marcus added details about their neighbors, painting a picture of a community that looked out for each other. "There's a dance in town next month," Tom mentioned. "Social at the church. Most everybody turns out for it. Good way to meet folks." "Maybe," Marcus said, glancing at Katherine. "If Katherine feels up to it by then." "I think I would like that," Katherine said softly. The idea of being part of a community, of having neighbors and friends, was appealing. After breakfast, Tom headed out to start on the fence repairs while Marcus showed Katherine around the ranch properly. He introduced her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, and the small herd of cattle that provided their income. Katherine learned that Marcus sold beef to the army at Fort Gibson and to suppliers in town, that the ranch was small but profitable enough to support them comfortably. "I'd like to expand eventually," Marcus explained as they walked through the south pasture. "Buy more land, increase the herd, but that takes time and money. For now, we have enough." They stopped at the top of a hill and Marcus pointed to a spot beneath an oak tree. "That's where Sarah is buried. I come up here sometimes to talk to her. I hope that doesn't bother you." "Of course not. She was your wife. It's right that you remember her." "I want you to know something, Katherine. Coming here, agreeing to marry me, it doesn't mean you're living in Sarah's shadow. You're your own person, and I respect that. This ranch, this life, it's yours to shape too." Katherine looked out over the rolling grassland, the cattle grazing peacefully, the house and barn nestled in the valley below. "I never thought I could have something like this. A real home. A place where I belong." "You do belong here." Marcus turned to face her. "I know we just met yesterday, but I want to be clear about my intentions. I would like to marry you, Katherine. Properly with a church wedding when you're ready. But I meant what I said about taking our time. We can get to know each other first, build trust. There's no rush." "I would like that too," Katherine admitted. "The getting to know each other part. Everything happened so fast. Just 2 weeks ago I was in St. Louis with no hope. Now I'm here and it feels like a dream." "It's not a dream. It's real and it's yours. We'll take it one day at a time." The days began to fall into a comfortable rhythm. Katherine took over the cooking and the household chores, but not as a servant. Marcus insisted on helping with dishes, with laundry, making it clear they were partners. In the afternoons, after the main work was done, Marcus taught her to ride Copper, patient as she learned to manage the big horse. They would ride out together, checking on the cattle, and Marcus would point out landmarks and tell stories about the land. Katherine's bruise faded gradually, the purple and yellow giving way to normal skin. As it disappeared, she felt something inside her healing too. The constant fear that had become her companion in St. Louis began to recede. She would catch herself humming while she cooked, smiling at something Tom said, laughing at Marcus's dry humor. The tightness in her chest eased. 2 weeks after her arrival, Marcus drove her into Tahlequah for supplies. It was market day, and the town was busy with activity. Katherine felt nervous about facing people, worried they would somehow know her shame, but Marcus stayed close by her side. He introduced her to shopkeepers and neighbors with quiet pride, simply saying she was his intended bride, here from St. Louis. People were friendly, if curious. Several women made a point of welcoming her, inviting her to church services and ladies' gatherings. At the general store, while Marcus was arranging for feed to be delivered, an older Cherokee woman approached Katherine. She was handsome and dignified, with silver threading through her dark hair. "You are Marcus Bryant's new bride," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, madam, Katherine Grace. I am Nancy Thornton." Katherine must have reacted to the name because the woman smiled slightly. "I see that name troubles you. I once knew a family by that name in St. Louis. The association is not pleasant." Nancy nodded as though she understood. "Names are just sounds. It is the person who gives them meaning. I knew Marcus's wife, Sarah. She was a good woman, kind to my family. Marcus is a good man. You will be happy here if you let yourself be. I hope so." "That bruise you had, it is nearly gone now." Nancy's dark eyes were sharp. "The visible marks heal. The invisible ones take longer. Give yourself time and grace, child, and know that you have friends here if you need them." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." Nancy patted her hand and moved on, leaving Katherine feeling oddly comforted. When Marcus returned with the supplies, he noticed her emotional state. "Everything all right?" "Yes, I just met Nancy Thornton. She was very kind." Nancy's good people. Her husband James runs a successful farm south of here. They're well respected in the Cherokee community. If Nancy's taken to you, that's high praise. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, a man approached. He was tall and well-dressed, with an air of authority that made Katherine instinctively step closer to Marcus. "Bryant," the man said curtly. "Jameson." Marcus's voice had gone flat. "Heard you finally got yourself a replacement. Pretty little thing." The man's eyes raked over Katherine in a way that made her skin crawl. "Amazing what you can order through the mail these days." "That's enough, Jameson. Katherine is my intended wife, and I'll thank you to speak respectfully." "Touchy." "I remember when you used to be fun, before that first wife of yours made you soft. Maybe this one will be more entertaining." Marcus went very still, his hand clenching on the wagon rail. Katherine could feel the tension radiating from him. Before he could respond, Tom appeared from seemingly nowhere. "Boss, we got a problem with that feed order. Need you to sort it out." He positioned himself between Marcus and Jameson, his weathered face calm but his eyes hard. Marcus took a breath, then nodded. He helped Katherine up onto the wagon seat, pointedly turning his back on Jameson. As they drove away, Katherine could feel him struggling to control his anger. "I apologize for that," Marcus said finally. "Frank Jameson is a piece of work. We used to be friends years ago, but he changed. Started drinking heavy, treating people poorly. His ranch hands quit on him regularly. He's tried to buy my land a few times, thinking I'd give up after Sarah died. When I refused, he got nasty about it. He seems like a terrible person." "He is, but he's just one person, Katherine. Don't let him color your view of everyone else here. Most folks are decent." "I know. Nancy Thornton proved that today." Marcus's expression softened. "Yes, she did." That evening, after supper, they sat on the porch together watching the sun set. It had become a habit, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Tonight, Katherine felt bold enough to ask something that had been on her mind. "Marcus, what made you decide to advertise for a bride?" "I'm grateful you did, but you seem like the kind of man who could have found someone locally." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I thought about it, but the truth is, most of the single women around here knew Sarah. They knew what we had together. I worried that anyone I courted would feel like they were competing with a memory, and I worried I would be comparing them to her, which wouldn't be fair. Someone new, from somewhere else, it felt like a cleaner start, a chance to build something fresh without the weight of the past hanging over it." "That makes sense. I worried I might feel like an intruder in Sarah's home, but you've never made me feel that way. This is your home, Katherine. Sarah would want it to be lived in, filled with life and laughter again. She would have liked you, I think. You're both strong women who faced hard circumstances with courage. I don't feel very courageous. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding myself together." Marcus reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. You left everything you knew, traveled halfway across the country alone, to start over in a strange place. That takes real courage. Katherine squeezed his hand, marveling at how safe she felt with him. A month ago, she had been terrified of men, flinching at sudden movements, expecting violence. But Marcus had been nothing but gentle and patient. He never pushed her, never demanded more than she could give. Slowly, carefully, she was learning to trust him. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "Ready for what?" "Ready to set a date for the wedding if you still want to marry me." Marcus turned to look at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "Are you sure? There's no pressure, Katherine. We can wait as long as you need." "I'm sure. I want to be your wife, Marcus. I want to build a life here with you. I'm not saying I'm healed from everything that happened, but I trust you. That's enough to start with." A slow smile spread across Marcus's face, transforming it from serious to joyful. "Then we'll do it properly. I'll talk to Reverend Mitchell tomorrow about scheduling a wedding. We can do it at the church in town, invite the neighbors, make it a real celebration. I don't have a proper dress. We'll find you one, or have one made. Katherine, I want you to have a wedding you can remember fondly. Whatever you need, we'll make it happen." They sat there as darkness fell, holding hands and making plans. Katherine felt something unfurling in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. The next few weeks were a flurry of preparations. Marcus was true to his word, sparing no expense for the wedding. Mrs. Patterson, the dressmaker in town, created a simple but beautiful cream-colored dress with lace at the collar and cuffs. Nancy Thornton and several other women from the community offered to help with the wedding feast. Tom cleaned out the barn for a dance afterward, muttering about all the fuss but clearly pleased to see Marcus so happy. Katherine threw herself into the preparations, grateful for the distraction. But late at night, alone in her room, she sometimes felt panic rising. What if she was making a mistake? What if Marcus turned out to be like Thornton, hiding his true nature until after they were married? What if she could not be a proper wife to him? She voiced these fears one evening as they sat on the porch. Marcus listened without interruption, then took both her hands in his. "Katherine, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'll make mistakes, say the wrong thing sometimes, probably track mud through your clean kitchen more than once. But I can promise I will never hurt you, never raise a hand to you in anger, never betray your trust in that way. If you ever feel afraid of me, I want you to tell me. We'll work through it together. Marriage should be a partnership, not a prison. But what if I can't be what you need? What if I'm broken somehow? You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference, and whatever you can give me, it's enough. We'll figure the rest out as we go." His steady confidence helped settle her nerves. Katherine realized she had spent so long being told she was worthless that she had started to believe it. Marcus saw something different in her, something valuable, and slowly she was beginning to see it too. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late October. The weather cooperated, providing a clear, cool day perfect for celebration. Katherine woke early, her stomach full of butterflies. Nancy Thornton and 2 other women arrived to help her dress, chattering and laughing, treating her like she was precious. When Katherine looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The cream dress fit perfectly, her dark hair was styled elegantly, and her face was free of bruises. She looked like a bride, not a victim. At the church, the pews were filled with neighbors and friends. Tom escorted her down the aisle since she had no family to do it. She saw Marcus waiting at the altar, dressed in a new suit, his eyes locked on her with such warmth and tenderness that her nervousness melted away. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity and joy. When Marcus slipped the gold ring onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her all his days, Katherine felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears, she realized. When had she last cried from happiness? "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Mitchell announced, and Marcus leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Katherine met him halfway, their lips touching in a gentle, sweet kiss that promised everything would be all right. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and the barn cleared for dancing. People brought food and gifts, well wishes and laughter. Katherine found herself surrounded by community in a way she never had been. These people accepted her, welcomed her, celebrated her marriage without judgment or suspicion. As evening fell and lanterns were lit, Marcus led her into the barn for the first dance. He held her carefully, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers as they moved to the music from a fiddle and guitar. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Incredibly happy. I never imagined I could feel this way." "This is just the beginning, Katherine. We have our whole lives ahead of us." They danced several songs before Tom cut in, insisting Marcus share his bride with the other guests. Katherine danced with Tom, with several neighboring ranchers, even with Nancy Thornton's husband James, who proved to be surprisingly light on his feet. She laughed and spun and felt like she was flying. Late in the evening, after most guests had departed, Katherine and Marcus stood in the doorway of their house, now truly theirs together. Marcus had carried her over the threshold to the cheers of the remaining guests, and now they were finally alone. "Katherine," Marcus said, his voice serious, "I want you to know we can take this as slow as you need. Tonight, tomorrow, however long. I meant what I said about not pressuring you." Katherine reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. Over the past weeks, her fear of physical contact had diminished. Marcus had helped her reclaim her sense of safety with his patience and gentleness. She was still nervous but not afraid, not of him. "I trust you, Marcus. I'm your wife. I want to be your wife in every way." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "Then come to bed, Mrs. Bryant." That night, Marcus proved himself to be as gentle and considerate as he had been in every other aspect of their relationship. He took his time, asked permission, made sure she was comfortable and willing every step of the way. When Katherine tensed at certain moments, remembering Thornton's rough hands and cruel intentions, Marcus stopped immediately and held her until she relaxed. He transformed what she had feared would be frightening into something beautiful, an expression of care and connection. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Marcus's arm around her, Katherine felt a profound sense of peace. She had not thought she could have this, a loving husband, a real marriage, a future full of possibility. But here she was, safe and cherished. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked, his hand gently stroking her hair. "Better than all right. I feel like I've come home." "You have. This is your home and I'm your home. Always." The next morning, Katherine woke in Marcus's arms, sunlight streaming through the window. For just a moment before full consciousness returned, she panicked, feeling trapped. But then Marcus stirred, pressed a kiss to her shoulder and said good morning in his deep, warm voice, and the panic receded. This was her husband, her partner. She was safe. They spent a lazy morning together, something neither of them usually allowed themselves. Marcus made coffee while Katherine started breakfast, and they ate sitting close together at the table, hands touching, smiling at each other like the newlyweds they were. "Tom said he'd handle the morning chores today," Marcus mentioned. "Gave us a day to ourselves." "That was kind of him. He's a good friend. Known him since I first came to Indian Territory. He worked for the previous owner of this land, and when I bought the place, Tom asked to stay on. He's been like a brother to me, especially after Sarah died. I'm glad you had him, that you weren't alone." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm glad I have you now, both of you, my family." The word family settled around Katherine like a warm blanket. She had never had a family, not really. The orphanage had been an institution, the Thorntons employers at best, abusers at worst. But this, what she had with Marcus, this was family. And it could grow. They could have children, create a real home filled with love and laughter. As autumn deepened into winter, Katherine settled fully into her role as Marcus's wife and partner. She took over the household completely, but Marcus never treated her as a servant. He valued her opinions, asked for her input on ranch decisions, shared the financial details openly. When he went into town for supplies, she went with him. When he worked on projects around the ranch, she helped or kept him company. The nightmares that had plagued Katherine in the early weeks gradually faded. She stopped flinching at sudden movements, stopped looking over her shoulder expecting to see Thornton. The ranch became her sanctuary and Marcus her safe harbor. They attended the church social in November, and Katherine found herself welcomed completely into the community. Several women invited her to join a quilting circle that met weekly. Nancy Thornton became a particular friend, her steady presence and wise counsel a comfort. Katherine learned that Nancy had her own history of hardship, having survived the trail of tears as a child. Her strength in the face of suffering inspired Katherine to keep pushing forward through her own healing. Winter brought its own challenges. The cattle needed extra care, and there were days when the cold was bitter. But Katherine loved the cozy evenings spent by the fireplace, reading aloud to Marcus or simply talking while she mended clothes and he worked on tack repair. They were building a life together, layer by layer, moment by moment. In January, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be certain before telling Marcus. When Doc Henderson confirmed it, she felt a mix of joy and terror. She was going to be a mother. She, who had no mother of her own, who had never really had a family, was going to create one. She told Marcus that evening after supper. He had been talking about his plans for spring planting and she just blurted it out. "I'm going to have a baby." Marcus stopped mid-sentence, his mouth open. Then his face transformed with pure joy. "You're certain?" Doc Henderson confirmed it today. "He thinks the baby will come in late summer." Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby, our baby. Katherine, this is wonderful. Are you happy?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I'm happy. Are you?" "Happier than I have any right to be. We're going to be parents." He pulled back to look at her face. "I'll take care of you, both of you, whatever you need." "I know. I trust you completely, Marcus." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Katherine continued her work around the ranch, though Marcus and Tom both became overprotective, insisting she rest more and avoid heavy chores. She tolerated their fussing because she knew it came from love. As her belly grew, so did her excitement. She and Nancy worked together to sew baby clothes and prepare a cradle. Marcus built a nursery addition onto the bedroom, working in the evenings to have it ready in time. The house filled with anticipation and hope. In late May, an unexpected visitor arrived. Katherine was in the garden, weeding around the vegetables, when she heard a wagon approaching. Looking up, she saw a well-dressed man and woman pulling to a stop in front of the house. With a jolt of sick recognition, Katherine realized it was the Thorntons. She stood frozen, her heart pounding as they climbed down from their wagon. Thornton looked older than she remembered, his face florid and puffy. Mrs. Thornton was pale and thin, her mouth pinched with dissatisfaction. They saw Katherine and started toward her. Marcus emerged from the barn, saw the strangers, then saw Catherine's face. He was beside her in seconds, his hand on her back, protective and solid. "Can I help you folks?" His voice was polite but cool. "We're looking for someone," Thornton said. "A young woman who used to work for us." "Katherine Grace. We heard she might be in this area." "Why are you looking for her?" Marcus asked. "She's a thief. Stole money from us and ran away. We've been searching for months." Mrs. Thornton's voice was shrill. "We finally tracked her through the mail-order bride registries. Someone said a girl matching her description came to Tahlequah." Katherine found her voice, though it shook. "I didn't steal anything from you. That was a lie." Both Thorntons focused on her, and she saw recognition followed by malicious satisfaction in their faces. "There you are, you little thief. We've come to take you back to St. Louis to face justice." Thornton moved forward, reaching for Katherine. Marcus stepped between them, and his voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "You'll take your hands off my wife and leave my property." "Your wife?" Mrs. Thornton's laugh was ugly. "You married a thief and a liar. She's nothing but an orphan girl who tried to seduce my husband." "That's a lie," Katherine said, anger giving her strength. "Your husband attacked me when I refused his advances. You know the truth, Mrs. Thornton. You heard him try to force himself on me that night. You just chose to blame me instead of him. How dare you?" But Mrs. Thornton's eyes shifted guiltily. Marcus's hand found Katherine's, squeezing gently. His presence gave her courage. "I know what happened that night because my wife told me the truth." Mr. Thornton attacked Katherine, beat her for rejecting him, then accused her of theft to cover his own crimes. "Now you've tracked her here to her home to continue harassing her. I'll ask you once more to leave. If you refuse, I'll have the sheriff escort you out." "The sheriff won't believe a whore over a respected banker," Thornton sneered, but he sounded less confident. "Maybe not in St. Louis, but here my wife is a respected member of the community, and I'm friends with Sheriff Miller. He knows me, knows I don't tolerate liars or abusers, so I'll let him sort this out." "Tom," Marcus called toward the barn, "ride into town and fetch the sheriff. Tell him we have trespassers making false accusations." Tom appeared quickly, took in the situation with sharp eyes, and nodded. "Be back within the hour, boss." As Tom rode off, Thornton's bravado faltered. "Now see here, there's no need to involve the law, we just want what's owed to us. Katherine owes you nothing. In fact, you owe her wages for the time she worked, compensation for the injuries you inflicted, and an apology. Though I doubt you're capable of that last one." Sheriff Miller arrived with Tom, a stern man in his 50s who had known Marcus for years. He listened to both sides of the story, though the Thorntons' version kept changing, becoming less certain as they tried to maintain their lies. Katherine told her story clearly, and Marcus corroborated what she had told him when she first arrived. The evidence of the old bruise was gone, but Katherine's calm honesty contrasted sharply with the Thorntons' bluster. "Seems to me," Sheriff Miller finally said, "that you folks have come a long way on a wild goose chase. Mrs. Bryant is a married woman, a respected member of this community, and I see no evidence she's stolen anything. Now you can head back to St. Louis quietly, or I can lock you up for harassment and trespassing. Your choice." The Thorntons left, defeated and angry, but they left. Katherine watched their wagon disappear down the road, feeling like a chapter of her life was finally closing. Marcus turned her into his arms, holding her carefully because of her rounded belly. "Are you all right?" "I am. For the first time, I really am. They don't have power over me anymore. I have you, I have my home, I have our baby coming. They can't touch any of that." "No, they can't. You're safe, Katherine. You're home." That night, lying in bed with Marcus's hand resting gently on her belly, Katherine felt the baby move. a strong kick against her ribs as though the little one was reassuring her of its presence. "Did you feel that?" she asked. "I did." Marcus's voice was full of wonder. "Our child, strong and healthy just like you. I want to be a good mother. I want to give our baby everything I never had." "You will. We will, together." Summer arrived with heat and long days. Katherine grew larger and more uncomfortable, but she had never been happier. The ranch prospered. Marcus's cattle brought good prices at market, and he was able to buy additional land and expand the herd. They hired an extra hand to help Tom, a young man named Peter who was respectful and hardworking. In late August, Katherine went into labor. Nancy Thornton came to help, along with Doc Henderson. Marcus paced the porch, worn to a frazzle by the sounds of his wife's pain and his inability to help. Tom kept him company, offering quiet reassurance. After 12 hours of labor, Katherine delivered a healthy baby boy. When Doc Henderson placed the infant in her arms, Katherine looked down at his tiny red face and felt overwhelming love. He was perfect, from his shock of dark hair to his miniature fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength. Marcus came in, looking terrified, and stopped when he saw them. A boy, our son." Katherine smiled through her exhaustion. "Do you want to hold him?" Marcus approached like he was handling glass, taking the baby with careful hands. The sight of her strong cowboy husband cradling their newborn son brought tears to Katherine's eyes. Marcus looked down at the baby with such love and wonder. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. "I was thinking Matthew, if you like it, after my grandfather, Matthew Bryant. It's perfect." Little Matthew was an easy baby, healthy and alert. He had Katherine's dark eyes and Marcus's sturdy build. The ranch adapted to include him, with Marcus building a cradle that could be moved from room to room so Katherine could keep him close while she worked. Neighbors visited with gifts and advice. Nancy Thornton became like a grandmother to Matthew, doting on him and giving Katherine guidance drawn from her own experience raising 5 children. The months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and sweet moments. Katherine discovered she loved being a mother. Watching Matthew grow and change, seeing Marcus transform into a devoted father, filled her heart to overflowing. The little family she had created became her entire world. When Matthew was 6 months old, Katherine realized she was pregnant again. This time, she was not terrified. She knew what to expect, knew she could handle it, knew Marcus would support her completely. They welcomed the news with joy. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Sarah's mother, arrived the following September. She was smaller than Matthew had been, with a head full of blonde hair that surprised them both. She was also louder, making her opinions known from day one. Katherine adored her fierce little girl. With 2 small children, the house was chaotic but full of life. Marcus hired another hand to help with the ranch work, so he could spend more time with his family. Tom became Uncle Tom to the children, teaching Matthew to whittle and telling Margaret stories. The ranch prospered year after year, growing into one of the most successful in the area. Katherine sometimes thought back to that desperate woman who had arrived in Tahlequah with a black eye and a carpet bag, fleeing abuse and seeking any kind of safe harbor. She could barely recognize herself in that frightened girl. Now she was a wife, a mother, a respected member of the community. She had a voice and opinions and the confidence to express them. Marcus had given her the space to heal and grow, had shown her what real love looked like. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus surprised her with a trip to Fort Smith, just the 2 of them, with Nancy watching the children. They spent 3 days together, eating at restaurants, walking along the river, staying in a real hotel. On their last evening, sitting on the hotel balcony watching the sunset, Marcus took her hand. You remember when you first arrived and I promised you would never be hurt again. I remember every word of that day. I want you to know, it's been the honor of my life to keep that promise. Watching you heal, watching you bloom into the confident, beautiful woman you were always meant to be has been my greatest joy. Well, that and the children, and the ranch. You know what I mean, Katherine laughed. I do know what you mean, and I want you to know you saved my life. Not just literally, though you did do that, but you saved my spirit, my ability to trust and love and hope. You gave me everything I never thought I could have. We saved each other, Marcus said. I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You brought life and love back into my world. You made this house a home again. They kissed as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years continued to pass. Matthew grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Margaret was wild and fearless, climbing trees and racing horses by the time she was 6. Katherine and Marcus added a third child, another boy they named Michael, who was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to ranch work but loved no less for it. The ranch expanded until it was one of the largest in the territory. Marcus and Katherine built a new, larger house, though they kept the original house intact for Tom, who had become family in every way that mattered. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years and struggled through lean ones, but they did it all together. Katherine became a pillar of the community, organizing church socials, helping new families settle in, mentoring young women who found themselves in difficult situations. She never forgot where she came from, and she made it her mission to help others find the same safety and hope she had been given. Nancy Thornton remained a close friend until her death at age 78. Katherine mourned her like a mother, grateful for the guidance and wisdom Nancy had shared over the years. The Thornton family remained close to the Bryants, their children growing up together, creating bonds that would last generations. As Katherine and Marcus aged, they watched their children grow into fine adults. Matthew took over the ranch, marrying a lovely young woman from town and giving them grandchildren. Margaret married a lawyer and moved to Kansas, though she visited often. Michael became a teacher, opening a school in Tahlequah that served both Cherokee and white children. On the evening of their 30th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Katherine sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. Their hair was gray now, their faces lined with years of laughter and the occasional tears, their hands weathered from decades of work. But they still held hands, still sat close together, still found comfort in each other's presence. Do you ever think about how different your life might have been if you hadn't answered my advertisement? Katherine asked, sometimes, but not with any real seriousness. My life began the day you stepped off that stagecoach. Everything before was just preparation. Even Sarah. I loved her and she was important to my story. But you, Katherine, you were my destiny. You were the person I was meant to build a life with. Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I was so afraid that day. Afraid you would reject me because of the bruise, afraid I was making a terrible mistake, afraid I would never be safe again. And then you made that promise. Never again, Marcus said softly. Never again, Katherine echoed, and you kept it. For 30 years, through everything, you've kept that promise. You've been my protector, my partner, my greatest love. I never imagined I could be this happy. The happiness was always in you. I just gave you the space and safety to let it out. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, surrounded by the life they had built. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter ringing out clear and joyful. The ranch land stretched around them, productive and beautiful. The community they had helped build thrived, a place where people looked out for each other and welcomed strangers. Katherine Grace had arrived in Tahlequah broken and desperate, seeking nothing more than escape. She had found instead a home, a family, a purpose, and a love that had healed her and made her whole. The mail-order bride with the black eye had become Katherine Bryant, wife, mother, grandmother, and beloved member of her community. And every day Marcus kept his promise. Never again did she know fear in her own home. Never again did she feel worthless or unwanted. Never again did she question whether she deserved love and respect. As they headed inside to join their family for dinner, Marcus held the door for Katherine and smiled at her the way he had been smiling at her for 30 years, full of warmth and devotion. "I love you, Mrs. Bryant," he said, "and I love you, Mr. Bryant, forever." Their story, which had begun with violence and fear, had transformed into one of healing and hope. The cowboy had kept his promise, and the mail-order bride had found her happily ever after. And in the wild, beautiful land of Indian Territory, they lived out the rest of their days in the peace and love they had both fought so hard to create. The Bryant Ranch would remain in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, a legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. And whenever the family gathered, someone would inevitably tell the story of how it all began, of the brave young woman who arrived with a black eye and the good man who promised she would never be hurt again. It was a story of second chances, of the power of kindness, and of love conquering fear. It was their story, and it was perfect. Years later, when Katherine was in her 70s and Marcus in his mid-70s, they would sit in the same spot on that porch, watching yet another sunset, their hands still intertwined. Their children had given them 12 grandchildren total, and those grandchildren were beginning to provide great-grandchildren. The Bryant name was well respected throughout Indian Territory, soon to become the state of Oklahoma. "Tell me again," Katherine would sometimes say on those quiet evenings, "about the day we met." And Marcus would smile, his eyes still bright despite his age, and recount every detail. How beautiful she had looked despite the exhaustion and the bruise. How his heart had broken seeing evidence of her suffering, how he had known somehow that she was meant to be his. "I think Sarah sent you to me," he would say. "I think she knew I needed someone to love, and that you needed someone to love you properly. It was her final gift to me, guiding you here." Katherine would squeeze his hand and agree. She had long since made peace with Sarah's memory, even felt grateful to the woman she had never met. Sarah had loved Marcus well, had made him into the kind of man who knew how to treat a woman with respect and tenderness. That legacy had saved Katherine's life. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Spring brought new calves and planting. Summer brought heat and long days of work. Autumn brought harvest and preparation. Winter brought rest and reflection. Through it all, the Bryant family thrived. When Marcus finally passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep, Katherine grieved deeply but not desperately. They had been given 35 years of marriage, 35 years of love and partnership and joy. It was more than many people got, and she was grateful for every moment. She continued to live on the ranch with Matthew and his family, playing with her great-grandchildren, tending her garden and sharing stories of the old days. She lived to the remarkable age of 84, her mind sharp until the end. On her final day, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Marcus had created, Katherine looked around the room and smiled. Every person there was a testament to the love she and Marcus had shared, to the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. "Tell them," she whispered to Matthew, who held her hand. "Tell them about the promise." "I will, Mama, we all will. Your story will live on." Katherine closed her eyes, content. She had come to Indian Territory as a frightened, broken girl with a black eye and nowhere else to turn. She was leaving it as a woman who had been deeply loved, who had loved in return, who had created something beautiful and lasting. The cowboy had promised, "Never again," and he had kept that promise every day of their life together. And that, Katherine thought as she drifted toward her final sleep, was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. Not just protection from harm, but the chance to become the woman she was always meant to be, strong and confident and loved. Her last thought was of Marcus, waiting for her somewhere beyond, ready to take her hand once more and lead her into whatever came next. She had not been afraid when she married him, and she was not afraid now. Love had conquered her fear then, and love would carry her forward now. The Bryant family buried Katherine next to Marcus on the hill overlooking the south pasture, where Sarah also rested. The three of them together, all part of the story of the ranch and the family it had fostered. At the funeral, Matthew told his mother's story about the mail-order bride who arrived with a black eye and the cowboy who promised she would never be hurt again. "They showed us what real love looks like," Matthew told the gathered crowd. "Not just romance, though they had that too, but partnership, respect, loyalty, and the daily choice to be kind to each other. That's their legacy, and it's what we'll pass on to our children." The Bryant Ranch continued to prosper long after Katherine's death, a living memorial to the love and work she and Marcus had put into it. And whenever a new bride married into the family, the women would gather around and tell her Katherine's story, reminding her that she was marrying into a family that valued and respected women, that would never tolerate abuse or cruelty. In the town of Tahlequah, which eventually became a thriving city, a small historical marker was placed near where the general store once stood. It commemorated the many mail-order brides who had come west seeking new lives and the men who had welcomed them. Among the names listed was Katherine Grace Bryant, whose story of courage and love had become legendary in the community. And so the story that began with violence and fear became a story of hope that echoed through generations. The mail-order bride with the black eye and the cowboy who promised, "Never again," lived on in the memories and values of their descendants, a reminder that even the darkest beginnings can lead to the brightest futures when met with love, courage, and the simple promise to treat each other with dignity and respect. Their love story was not just about romance, though it certainly had been romantic. It was about redemption and healing, about second chances and the courage to start over. It was about a good man who saw past a woman's injuries to her strength, and a brave woman who dared to trust again, despite every reason not to. Together, they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love that continued to inspire everyone who heard their story. And in the end, that was the true happily ever after, not just the years they spent together, but the ripples of goodness and love that spread out from their union, touching lives and shaping futures for generations to come. The promise Marcus made to Katherine that first day, "Never again," had become more than just protection from physical harm. It had become a family creed, a commitment to always choose love over fear, kindness over cruelty, and hope over despair. The story of the mail-order bride and her cowboy was complete, a full circle from beginning to end, from fear to love, from brokenness to wholeness. And it was, in every sense of the word, a beautiful ending to a beautiful life.